Today, you're going to learn which of these two giant LED mats from GODOX or Intellytech is better for you. A special thanks to GODOX and Intellytech for sending us their lights for comparison. We have the GODOX FL600bi and the Intellytech MEGA-8 LIGHTCLOTHS 3.0. Before we get into the comparison, we need to talk about why we're comparing these two lights in particular. The MEGA-8 is a 400 watt light and the GODOX FL600bi is 600 watts. GODOX does make a F400bi, which might be a more direct comparison, but the reason that we're comparing the MEGA-8 with the 600bi is because of the price point. Currently, the GODOX is a little bit cheaper than the MEGA-8, so we want to see if the higher wattage is the only real difference between the two worth consideration, and also see if the cheaper price point of the GODOX means it has any major build quality drawbacks. We should also mention that Intellytech has an RGB version of their panel, which does cost a little bit more than its bicolor counterpart, but according to them, the output is exactly the same. We're going to jump to initial comparisons of both, talk about what's similar, give their pros and cons, and compare the light quality and accuracy. So let's get into it. The Intellytech, although longer, has an overall slightly smaller surface area than the GODOX being 121 by 121 centimeters, where the Intellytech is 145 by 84 centimeters. In terms of what's similar, both lights come with a softbox and a grid and mount to a frame and connect to a control box. Both have app control, but the GODOX also has a remote control optional accessory, and both have the ability to be powered by V-mount batteries, but the GODOX is dual voltage, so you can use both 14 and 26 volt V-lock batteries. Both have the ability to use DMX control, and GODOX even make a wireless transmitter for DMX, which is a nice touch. Both have hook and loop fasteners, so you can zip tie multiple units together. And finally, they also both have a control box extension cable and a lantern with skirts as optional accessories. Now, let's talk a little bit about their design. Both lights are set up in almost the same way. You set up the frame, attach the light to the frame. With GODOX, you do this via bongo ties, and with the Intellytech, you do this with more secure aircraft tension straps. You then use Velcro to attach the softbox to the light body, and then you install your different grid. Overall, we much prefer the quick frame on the Intellytech, but we prefer the simplicity of the GODOX design, but more on this later. For now, let's look at light quality and output. The GODOX has a temperature range of 2700 to 8500 Kelvin, and the Intellytech has 3000 to 9999 Kelvin. But to see the full picture, we pulled out our Cine C800 light spectrometer to test full color accuracy and output. All testing was done at 3 meters away in complete darkness with a half-stop diffuser installed on each light. Here are the results. You can see overall the GODOX is a little bit brighter.
It's so much brighter!
This may seem obvious given that it's 600 watts, but it has a larger surface area as well, so we thought it was worth checking to confirm nonetheless. We also found that both lights are high enough quality for professional on-set usage, but it's always a recommendation that you purchase a color meter to make sure you're actually getting the color temperature you want. This is where I wish both brands would take an idea from Nanolite. Their newer bicolor COBs have some basic correction bulbs built in. Not enough that they're considered RGB, but just enough that they can fix basic green-magenta shifting. This allows lights to be more accurate, have longer lifespans, and keeps costs from inflating too much. Now, let's jump into the pros and cons of each light and what makes them unique. Let's start with what's good about the GODOX. We already mentioned that the output of the GODOX is brighter.
So much brighter!
Which really does make all the difference. But another major benefit of the GODOX is that the light itself is IP65 water resistant, so you can use it outside in the rain. This is a super cool, useful feature, but keep in mind that the control box itself isn't water resistant, so that would still need to be undercover without blocking the internal fans.
Why?
Maybe they can work on that. Even though the GODOX has a bigger surface area, it actually packs down into a much smaller case, making it way more travel friendly. But we should mention that the quality of the case is just okay. It has slotted Velcro sections, but they don't tend to stay where they belong because only one side has Velcro, and when packed up, it's all pretty heavy and we think it really could have used some wheels and a pull handle. But before we get into any more of the negative points towards the GODOX, let's look at some of the pros of the Intellytech. This is going to be quite a quick one, but in terms of the build quality, the Intellytech does feel more robust than the GODOX, and we much prefer the quick setup frame and the mounting system. Once it's set up, it feels super solid, especially if you're planning on mounting outside. We also want to mention that the Intellytech case in general is really nice quality. It's very well built. Everything fits together nicely and it feels like it's going to protect your light. It also has wheels to make transport easier. I mean, I got a bad back. It's necessary. Now let's talk the negatives of the GODOX. The one glaring issue of the GODOX is the quality of the frame. Although it slaps together quickly, works well and seems strong and robust, our issue is more when taking it apart. We believe its design is flawed and have found that the frames are too tight, which tends to jam them together and leads to screws becoming wedged, and this has led to us stripping 2 of the threads on the frame on the first use. We think it's awkward, and we feel this could have been better designed. It's been an issue every time we go to use it. You can get around this if you pull on the frame in the opposite direction of the screw when unscrewing to relieve tension, but you really shouldn't have to do this, and if you have assistants on set, they may not know to do it. We aren't saying that the light overall is bad in terms of the build quality. In fact, it's pretty good and we actually prefer the convenience, but the frame probably needs work. Next is a minor issue, and that is the mounting bongo ties. They work fine, but they don't feel the most strong or secure, especially if you use them outside, and we promise that at least a few of them will get lost.
They need a bag!
I would much rather have something similar to the Intellytech clips. Another thing that they should learn from the Intellytech is the elastic added to the edges of the light to help mounting to the frame much easier when doing it solo. This would make the GODOX a lot easier to set up. Something else worth mentioning is that there's no mounting bracket included in the kit for the control box, even though the control box has a mounting point on it. I assume that this was to keep costs down, but it's quite strange not to include it. Now let's talk the negatives of the Intellytech. The first big drawback that we have for the Intellytech is that we find it pretty fiddly to set up and potentially over-engineered. In general, we all want gear that is easy and smooth to set up, and that's the thing, with the Intellytech it feels a bit like a chore. The softbox can't be too tight on the frame, nor can it be too loose, otherwise the diff won't fit. And if the diff is on slightly wrong position, then the grid won't fit. You also have to remove the softbox setup to use the lantern. It's just quite fiddly, and we found it more annoying than we should have. Just remember that if you have someone new on set and things aren't intuitive, you have to show them how to do these things, and all of this takes time. The next drawback is the overall light output. For a key light on a subject, 400 watt might seem like a lot for a COB light, but when that's spread over such a large area, it doesn't seem to have the same punch that you might expect. We really struggle to compete against any daylight. Now do keep in mind we live in Australia, where we're on average 1 stop brighter than the rest of the world.
It sucks!
Yes, it does. But if we didn't black out our locations, it felt like the wrong tool for the job, and this is in comparison to using the GODOX in a similar situation where we actually had to turn the brightness down. Next, the angle mount is also pretty bad. It doesn't give us confidence that it's gripping onto the baby pin. It's probably okay for mounting directly onto a light stand, but we wouldn't trust it for mounting high up and above someone, which is something that we want to use these lights for. We suggest swapping it out for a C-stand grip head. And lastly, I'm sure some people would disagree, but we hate this grid, man.
Hate it so much!
So much! It's super rigid, and we find it tricky to fit inside the softbox snugly. Apparently, it's meant to sit slightly outside of the frame, and we're not totally sure why, but we'd love to see a non-rigid option for the grid, similar to what the GODOX is doing. Now, looking at all of this in terms of which giant light mat we prefer, both are good. But we probably prefer the GODOX a tiny bit more. It's brighter, quicker, and less awkward to set up, and it folds down smaller, and it's a very similar price. But with that said, the poor design of the frame is a deal breaker for us. It really comes down to whether or not you want to gamble with that, or if you want to try and find an alternative frame. The Intellytech is well built, and the specs are good, but the output is a little disappointing, and it's awkward to set up and use. Neither one of these lights is cheap, so we think both of them could use a little bit of revision. But the decision is up to you. We have put a link in the description where you can buy one of these lights online. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. Otherwise, you can follow us in the social links below. We'll see you next time.
Go!